On July 6, 2011, a small passenger turboprop aircraft, Beech 190, Flight 368, en route to Greenville, South Carolina, USA, during takeoff at 10:45 local time, veered to the left and vertically upwards, then flipped over and crashed into a hangar belonging to the U.S. Airways at Charlotte International Airport. Almost all of the passengers and 2 crew members aboard the small passenger aircraft became victims of the tragedy, minus 17 passengers and 2 crew members. 2 more people, including passenger Cassandra Clare, are considered missing. The radio message, presented below with minor corrections and abbreviations, was transmitted on a rarely used frequency for communication at the time and was intercepted by a ham radio operator from North Carolina. He recorded the message and handed the recording to the police. An investigation began, during which it was revealed that the city of East River mentioned in the message does not exist on the map of the USA. The recording was considered a joke, and the case was closed. What was interesting in the recording was that strange sounds resembling whispers were heard at the last minute. Independent experts denied the possibility that the sounds are human-made, believing that they belong to an animal or were artificially created. The whereabouts of passenger Cassandra Clare, who was on Flight 368, have still not been determined. Can anyone hear me? My name is Cassandra Clare. Something terrible has happened to me. I think I'm going crazy. I was on Flight 368 from Charlotte to Greenville. Nothing strange happened, except for a little turbulence during takeoff. It's been quite some time now, and I was already worried why we hadn't landed yet. It took 3 hours for the plane to start descending. As soon as we landed, I rushed to the exit because I was very late due to the long flight. What seemed strange to me at that moment was that no one was getting up from their seats or making any movements. Now I think I understand why. As soon as I stepped out, I saw that we were not in Greenville but in some other city. Apparently we made an emergency landing, I thought, but I didn't return to the plane. I kept walking. The airport was completely deserted. It probably hadn't been operational for a long time, as the board on the wall was not electronic and showed flights from 1979. I moved on, hoping to find a place to grab a bite to eat in this city. The streets were deserted. Not a single moving car or pedestrian, but there were old cars from the 60s to the 70s parked everywhere. A dense, heavy fog enveloped everything. I could only see about 5 meters ahead. As I walked, it felt like someone was watching me from around the corners. I looked back, but I didn't see anyone. A shiver ran down my spine and sweat started dripping from my forehead. Something very strange is happening here, I thought. Finally, I found a run-down store of mediocre quality. Entering it, I also didn't see anyone, neither the seller nor the customers. But my alarm only grew. Now it seemed to me that invisible eyes were watching me from all sides and waiting for something from me. I walked through the goods. Everything was expired. I grabbed a pack of candy and checked the manufacturing date. 1979. I rushed to the checkout counter. There lay an old receipt. The date on it was stamped May 14th, 1979. My legs gave out. No one had lived in this city for 32 years. I ran back to the airport, forgetting my belongings in the store. The omnipresent invisible eyes followed me every step of the way. The air rang in my ears, and it seemed like someone was whispering persistently in my ear. It was unbearable. I rushed inside the airport and looked out the window. My heart sank. The plane was already gone. It flew away, leaving me alone in the empty city. I couldn't stand anymore and fell to my knees. Tears streamed from my eyes and I couldn't stop them. I knelt in the center of the abandoned airport and cried. Then I screamed, hoping that the plane and everyone on it would somehow hear me and take me out of this hell. I screamed until I was hoarse, until I got a headache. Then I ran out of strength and I blacked out. I woke up because I was being dragged across the tiles towards the exit, grabbed by the wrists. These were human hands, but they emanated a terrible cold, like from a freezer. I had no strength to break free from the grip, and I lost consciousness again. Waking up, I found myself at some intersection. My legs wouldn't obey me at all, and my head turned with difficulty. My whole body stiffened as if I were nailed to the road with thousands of nails. I lay on the bare asphalt for about half an hour. Then, gathering all the remaining strength of will, I slowly got up. My legs were still weak, and I could hardly move. I decided to find a car to get out of there. Around me were small one-story houses, but there was no sign of any cars. I walked from block to block but couldn't find a single automobile. They all seemed to have vanished. As I walked, something began to follow me again from everywhere, from house windows, bushes, from behind poles. Suddenly I saw a figure of a girl emerge from the mist. I froze and stared at her. She didn't even glance my way, just ran past me and soon disappeared into the fog. There was something strange about her, and only in retrospect, thinking about her, did I realize that the girl was translucent, as if made of that fog. I started to panic. I ran in the opposite direction, just ran without looking back. Meanwhile, life in the town began to stir. Cars appeared out of nowhere, with the same foggy ghost-like people inside. Ghosts emerged from houses, as if going to work. All their empty eyes were watching me, but the ghosts continued on their way. Finally, I reached the end of the town. Before me, a sign emerged from the fog with the inscription, "You are leaving the town of East River. Have a good journey." I couldn't run anymore and walked slower. I walked for about 3 hours, and that damned fog still didn't dissipate. It seemed to be getting closer, ready to engulf me and drag me back into that underworld. Due to hunger, I couldn't think of anything. All of this seemed like a dream, and I would wake up any moment in a cozy, dry airplane seat. But unfortunately, it wasn't a dream. Soon I saw another sign, and I broke out in a fever while my body was drenched in sweat. It read, "Welcome to East River. Population 2306. I've been living in an abandoned store for 3 weeks now. The canned food is almost gone. I see them. They're outside, just standing there, staring at me and not going anywhere, apparently waiting for me to let them in. I found a device in the local radio station that can transmit a signal. It seems to be working, although I can only transmit messages on one wavelength. I don't know anymore if everything here is real, or if I'm lying in some psychiatric hospital, and all of this is hallucinations. I learned that these creatures can only walk in the fog, otherwise they'll disappear. Despite turning on 3 fans I found here, the fog still seeps through the door crack bit by bit. If anyone hears me, get me out of here. I'm in East River. I'm in East River, and I'm not alone here." I vividly remember that it happened on the evening of January 1st because my friends and I were setting off the remains of fireworks after New Year's. I just don't remember the year, but I was around 13 to 15 years old at the time. A younger neighbor boy ran up to us and said that our neighbor had fallen from the balcony on the 8th floor. Naturally, we became interested and rushed behind the building in a crowd. Not much time had passed, so there weren't many people around the body yet. We could hear the daughter screaming from the balcony. By the way, she was trying to follow her mother onto the street, but someone was holding her back. I ran up very close and saw the bloodied body and bones sticking out from both knees apparently. The woman landed on her legs, and the impact was so strong that the joints and bones broke through the skin. It was the first time I saw human bones up close. I knew this woman very well because I grew up in this neighborhood, but after the fall, she was unrecognizable. As it turned out later, this woman's sister, the aunt of the girl screaming from the balcony, had come to congratulate her on New Year's. And as soon as the neighbor opened the door, she began to scream, pointing at her with her finger. "Devil, devil, get away from me." And running away, jumped from the balcony, although I didn't understand why the balcony was open in winter. The neighbor was certainly too fond of alcoholic drinks, so it could well have been delirium tremens. Or maybe she really saw something. After this incident, her daughter was placed in a psychiatric hospital for some time. My grandfather used to tell this story from his youth when he served in the army. He was stationed at some secret base associated with launching atmospheric probes and other equipment. It was winter, and they ran out of fuel to heat the barracks. So the commander sent soldiers to gather firewood. But since the military base was classified, they couldn't disclose its location, and consequently, they couldn't chop down trees nearby. My grandfather and about a dozen others volunteered to go for the firewood. They had to go at least 10 kilometers. So they took a horse, hitched up a sled, and the sergeant grabbed a rifle just in case, along with some guard dogs. Wild animals might be around, wild boars, wolves, or who knows what else. They arrived at the logging site, chopped wood, loaded the sled, and started to head back. But in winter, darkness falls early, so they were returning almost in the dark, and through the forest no less. Somewhere on the way back, near the military base, they heard some noise in the bushes nearby. My grandfather says, at first we thought it might be a wild animal. We got a little tense. The sergeant gave the order, everyone, quiet, freeze in place. We stood, listening, and from those damn bushes came some kind of howling or humming, like wind in a chimney. We decided to give that place a wide berth. Just as we were about to move, the horse suddenly stopped dead in its tracks, and 3 guys couldn't budge her. And then the dogs started to get agitated, barking, pulling on their leashes to get at the sergeant. He couldn't take it anymore, decided to let his favorite Gray off the leash. He thought Gray would run around for a bit and calm down. But as soon as Gray got his freedom, he dashed towards those bushes and started barking like crazy. The sergeant was just about to follow him when suddenly we heard the dog yelp and a dull thud. Silence. We stood there frozen. Then, in complete silence, a body flew out of the bushes in a sort of parabolic trajectory and crashed right into the sergeant's legs. Shocked, he fired a burst from his rifle into the bushes. Me and a few others ran up to him. What I saw stayed etched in my memory forever. Standing on half-bent legs, with crazy eyes, the sergeant and the skinned, furless body of poor Gray, steam rising from him in the cold. At that moment, the horse reared up, throwing off the bewildered soldiers, and bolted with the sled towards the base. We grabbed the sergeant and ran after her. We ran like madmen the rest of the way. We practically crashed into the base, and everyone looked at us in amazement, asking how we managed to lose the horse she had returned without us 10 minutes earlier. We told them everything, and the sergeant sat in the corner. Mourning Gray meant a lot to him. The base commander came, listened to us, and said it was probably a bear. But what the hell kind of bear can skin a poor dog with one leap? And bears don't howl like that creature did. But the boss didn't want to hear anything and called it a day. The next morning, they sent out a new team to that accursed place to see what was there and retrieve the rifle we left in a hurry on the snow. The sergeant also volunteered, saying he'd show the way and maybe find his Gray and give him a proper burial. You can imagine the poor sergeant's shock when he saw that at the very spot where we were yesterday, there were plenty of our footprints, sled tracks, horse tracks, and the rifle lying nearby, but not a trace of the poor shepherd dog. And as the sergeant claimed, even at the very spot where his beloved dog fell into his arms, he didn't find a drop of blood. That's the story. I still wonder what could it have been. And by the way, they didn't find any traces in those bushes, although they searched carefully.